Everyone. Appreciate everyone joining the last session of the day before the big party. I promise to keep this one lively, particularly with our two guests here. So welcome to the session on bank transformation. I'm Ken Mertzel. I'm the global industry leader for financial services automation anywhere. So I work with customers talking about how to apply the technology in industry. Given that my background is in banking, I was previously at Bank of America for 15 years. But fortunately, you don't have to hear from me talk today about automation, because you're going to hear actually from two of our customers in the industry. So before we move forward, first of all, brought to you by our legal group, just quick safe harbor statement. So we will talk about some future capabilities today. Please base any purchase decisions based on capabilities currently in the market. So that brought to you by legal. All right, so now what I want to talk to today about is bank transformation, and I'm really excited about the topic since banking is number one industry for automation, and I think part of that is the fact that there is this integrated suite of capabilities, because you all know there's no one capability that's going to be able to automate an entire process. And so what's really exciting now is you've heard a lot today about Gen AI, and so I think it opens up a whole host of additional capabilities and additional use cases that couldn't be done before. So today the plan will be we'll basically hear from our two speakers, who I'll introduce shortly, spend about a half hour, then we'll come up on stage, I'll talk to them, we'll do about two or three questions, and all that so that you can be thinking about what questions you want to ask our speakers. So that's really a key portion of the session, so be thinking about that. I mean, I think part of the big benefit of Imagine is the ability to talk to other customers, and so you have a great opportunity to do that today. So with that, I will briefly introduce our speakers. So I'm very excited to have Matt Stewart here from PNC. As well as Mike Reynolds, who you heard on stage earlier from Key Bank. So with that, I will hand it over to Matt.
There's no walk-up music for us?
Sorry.
Oh, I'm going the wrong direction. Which is the correct? There we go. So I'm Matt Stewart. I'm COE manager for intelligent automation at PNC Bank. I manage RPA, Automation Anywhere, and Core AI. It's a virtual assistant product. As you know, we recently acquired a bank, and now we're the 5th or 6th largest bank in the United States, depending on when you look at the numbers. We've got around 60,000 employees across various lines of business, from retail, commercial, wealth, et cetera. My story is a little bit unique. I started as on-site help desk and automated my own job enough that people started noticing and started asking me to do it for other people. And then eventually, when a COE got started at PNC, I was brought in as one of the first developers. So I was the third automation developer doing Automation Anywhere work. This was about 6 years ago, and I've been there for the entire journey. I've gone through being a developer, BA, tester, to an innovation consultant and strategist, and now I'm managing the COE for 2 of the products. That number has been updated since I shared these slides. We're on 84%, I think it was, on Friday, done our A360 migration. Hoping to be done with that rest of the way so that we can start to get to what I'm hoping to do when it comes to transforming bank operations. This model of traditional automation is not just an automation thing, but it's a very typical process that you see at any place that has been around forever. If you get rid of the bot part and just look at the rest of it, you've got a customer that walks into some front office, and the front office employee takes some information from them, fires it off into the void, and then they say goodbye to the customer, and the customer leaves. And then someone in the back office picks up work from a queue and does some work, and then the process is finally done. If you took that process and looked at it 30 years ago, it would look the same. It'd be a fax, or maybe someone sending snail mail. You do it today, it's somebody filling out some form, and it goes off into a back-end queue, and nothing has really changed. And when we come in and we do traditional automation, we're just putting a bot in to read the queue. And that's, I think, what everyone's done for a long time. You heard in the keynote earlier today, I think people were talking about scheduled bots, getting away from scheduled bots. I think Micah was in here talking about scheduled bots, and it's kind of missing what's really possible. So when I think about transforming, I don't think about just introducing AI and automation into an as-is state. I think about taking what's currently there and asking some questions. I personally do not care about the current state. It's never really come to my attention, or it's never really important to me when somebody asks me to automate something. I ask them what they're trying to solve. What's the problem you're trying to solve? If 40 years ago someone walked into your bank and wanted to open up a loan, same goal, but if you come today and you want to automate that process, you shouldn't be automating the process you stood up 40 years ago. So this little framework of 3 questions is what I started to do to educate people on how you can start to transform front and back office. There's a back office employee that is picking up work in a queue. What are they picking up? What information do they need to do their job? Find out, question 2, where that information exists in your organization. It's got to be there. If you've got customers, you probably know who they are. You've got a customer information record. Figure out where all that information sits. And then in the front office, structure the request going to the back office so that it relies on what you already know and asks the question of what you don't know. Example, you go into a branch and say you want to change your address. Why do you have to wait 5 days to get an email back or a letter saying that it's correct? They can take your information. You have the systems of record in the back office that have all of the other information about you. All that you need to do is ask old address, new address, customer ID. You now know who they are, what they want, why they want it, and you can just put a tool right in between to talk to those systems of record in the back office. This is real transformative automation to me. You're not taking an existing process and just piecemealing some components onto it. You are taking what the goal of the customer was, introducing a tool in the middle, which in this case would be Copilot, having it interact with your systems of record and your front office employee. I think Mahir used the word system of work this morning. I did not have that information, or I would have put that on the slide, but it's effectively a system of work. They're interacting with one single thing, doing all of the stuff in the back office. That middle piece right there doesn't have to be limited to just structured requests. One of the use cases that we're applying this to is document automation. You go into a branch and you have to fill out some paperwork. A lot of places scan it, send it in an email, gets fired off into the back office. Someone picks up a document, tracks down a request, merges it together. If you've got a document automation tool, doesn't matter what it is, if you can hit it with an API, that embedded automation can talk to that Doc AI tool, pull out the necessary data, just like in this previous slide where I'm talking about identifying what information is needed to complete the request. If it's in a document and you can get the document from the customer and your intelligent document processing tool can get the information from the document, you can do that. There's no problem. So the part that this becomes super appealing for is as you start to pitch this to business leaders, no one has asked me about the ROI for this, which is kind of weird because it's automation. But they've almost entirely focused on the fact that the customer can now come into the branch and get exactly what they need and get feedback and be gone in 5 minutes rather than 3 to 5 days. That front office employee no longer has to hope everything goes well, because if it doesn't, they're going to see that customer come back in a week very upset. They're going to have to apologize. They're going to have to own it even though it wasn't them. Being able to have that employee say, I took care of that for you, and then the customer's gone and happy, means that customer's happy, front office employee is happy. If the return on investment is $0, you're going to have no turnover, you're going to have more customer loyalty. There's other ways that you're going to measure this. And it's important enough that people aren't even asking those questions to me. So transformation, to me, I don't have that line, it's gone. I had a line in here. Automation plus process improvement is intelligent automation. I think that's the key that you should take away. Transforming your bank operations isn't about putting components in to try to solve individual problems. It's looking at the goal of the overall process, figuring out where in your tech stack and where in your information stack, so to speak, you can solve that problem, creating a new process, leveraging it, and then releasing that to your customers and your employees. I believe that's all for me. Oh, I do have one more. There are some other things that we want to do with this in the future. So the use cases that I'm talking through are kind of, they're the easy ones. Somebody comes in, they say, I want to update my address. Very easy for you to click the address change button. Someone comes in and says, my mother just died. I'm a power of attorney on her account. I need you to transfer the... Banker doesn't know what buttons to press. So if they don't know what work needs to be done, they don't know what request to select. But now with things like generative AI coming out, they might not need to know which button to press. They can just type the request from the customer, and the back office processing that would be necessary can be transformed into the structured request in the front. We know what information you need based on what that person has declared. We need to know their account number, we need the legal documents, et cetera, and then that employee's job is to just act out the information that's been recommended. We've already done a lot of the top components, APIs, database, other human interactions with task routing, Doc AI, but being able to plug into that Gen AI component when employees really don't know what they're supposed to do with some crazy scenarios that happen in banking and I'm sure some areas, would make it so that that human in the front office can own everything with minimal training. Michael.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's see if I get the slides right. Nope, not intuitive interface. Okay, the evolution of service digitization. So this is our Key Bank scenario, and think back to 2017. Whenever we first started training people, we decided that, hey, we don't know exactly what we're going to do. Anybody that signed up for training, we basically took you in, right? 45 people took us up on that offer, of which about 22 put something into production. We had a COE, a couple people trying to figure this out. So it was the very early days, and you can see it was an exploration for us. Now, fast forward a couple more years, and we're like, how do we really escalate this? How do we make it meaningful? How do we not build a bunch of technical debt, right? And so we decided we're going to centralize. So those 22 people that put something into production, we said, hey, do you want to do this full time? Now they had some challenges because they had a current job and then they were automating on the side. And some people were like, I'm more business oriented. And others are, I want to be more tech. A vast majority, 80% of those roughly, did not have a tech background. So they were business people that understood the processes. So we said, we're going to invest in you. 13 said yes. And so that centralized where we started to really launch, we got 68 processes, and think those are unattended bots. When we got to that piece, we saw some optimizations that we could do. So some of you probably have many business units that you support, and then you're always constantly thinking, how do I get a VM? How do I get a license? I need to apply the license file. And the first thing we said was, hey, let's stop doing that. Let's get a pack of licenses so it doesn't take 2 weeks to buy and then apply your license file to your machine. Those were the early days of things that we were dealing with. And then we really started to optimize. So at around 130 processes, we were starting to aggregate teams. So this is a stage where we split into agile teams. We had Azure DevOps as the tool that we were managing our backlog. We had, I call them an agile leader. Some people call them Scrum Masters. Scrum is very prescriptive, so I don't like that term, but that's just my personal preference. And we built that team out, and then they started to align. They had different systems that they started to get better with. And all of a sudden, we had a loan services group, we had a wealth group, we had a operations, more money-moving type group, and they just started to assimilate and support their units that way. And then revolutionizing, when we crossed 200 processes, I remember those days of going from version 11 to A360. We completed ours about, 6 months ago. But when you can get on the same platform, you have the same initiatives, you have alignment, then you start to accelerate. And today we're at 285 processes. So now's the time for us to innovate. The generative AI, one of the things I commented earlier on was the ability for bots to create bots. I don't know if you call that Autobot. I like that. I'm a Transformers kind of guy. I could go with that. But the Autobot, when you think of that, all of a sudden, now we're getting capabilities that guide developers. So the tenets, the rules that you apply, those can get enforced up front. You're not checking after the fact. And then accelerating development to my commitments, and I've made them pretty public. We have 100 controls of the bank that we're going to automate every year. So I'm on 62 right now. We'll get that this year, but I have 100 more to do. Wouldn't it be great? And I'm going back to that 55% number that Mahir threw out. 55% faster, better. That means I get 155. That would be huge in my space. And when I think of a great concept, don't take a broken process and automate it, because, well, now you get the broken pieces faster. Streamline that process, make the enhancements, keep that pipeline always coming. So, a lot of people are like, hey, you're gonna build 100 bots, do you have line of sight to them next year? So when I'm pitching for funding and board, I have that line of sight. I know the processes that we're going to automate, and we flag those for automation and tag them with underlying systems. So there's a little bit to the secret sauce that we have. Oh, I think I just hit the wrong button. Uh-oh. Who can save me? Okay. Insurance Accords. Anyone here in banking like compliance? No hands, right? How many people have to do compliance? Yes. We're all in that game, and then because we do it, we have to show passion and like it, right? You get it. So Insurance Accords, when you're doing a commercial deal, and this is a commercial space that we're dealing with, so think CMBS, commercial mortgage-backed securities, the largest deals that are out there. Very important that the insurance is compliant. And some of these factors, when you're doing the Mall of America, that kind of loan, it's a very large loan with numerous tenants. I think there's 2,300 leases, right? So each of those has specific kind of requirements that they would need. So your insurance policies, they're numerous. And what we've done is we've taken Automation Anywhere on the front side. So we have our existing application. We do a JSON call to pass to the bot to know that it runs, right? Kicks it off. We send the information, a document for extraction, and then a bot comes back and does the check from the underlying document to the system. So this is proof of concept for us right now. We're proposing that solution, and as you can see, it really accelerates our compliance. So now we're getting instant messages of, hey, these values line up. We're not pulling up a document over here, pulling up a system, and then trying to interpret the values. Anyone that's seen an Insurance Accord document for commercial property has a bunch of line items, right? And it'll say like boiler insurance, minimum coverage, maybe $5 million, and it has a checkbox. So those are things that have traditionally been challenges for people to get in and do. So this is something that we can take from a QC process, and then once we get confidence in that, then we can take it up front and start to do the data input of these Insurance Accord compliance items and really get our relationship with that client near real time. I don't know how many people have home mortgages, but insurance renewal, it's usually when your insurance agent calls you and it's like, hey, let's do a review, almost time. And then I have the anxiety in this conversation because they're always trying to upsell me a product or say, oh, well, the housing market, we could talk about that forever, but now values have increased, so have your insurance limits increased, all those kind of activities. That's a consumer level automation. Okay, hyper automation. So I started out with RPA in 2017. Our journey has come into 2019 when we centralized and really advanced our RPA. In 2022, we added low-code solutions to that. In 2023, at the beginning, we did the intelligent document processing. So 2023, the intelligent, artificial intelligence, generative AI, where's our focus? So I alluded a little bit earlier today that we have taken a very big focus on generating SARs. Dominic mentioned that in his presentation as well. So when we think about fraud and anti-money laundering activities and those kind of associated agencies and processes, we'll have internal investigators. And what happens with those internal investigators, we have bots today that pull in the info. So if there's an IPI number or some unique identifier, we'll go to all our underlying systems, build a Word doc, and then those go into specific, I'm going to call them work queues for our investigators to come into. Those documents, they're fantastic, right? They have all the data, they got the supporting details, the screenshots, anything that you would need for local law enforcement, FBI, or to file that SARS report. What they don't do is put it into human readable language. So now we've got people interpreting these values, the next iteration, we'll take that to another level. Okay, I'm going to pause there. I'm going to give it back to Ken.
Great. Well, thanks, Mike and Matt. Appreciate the insights. So you all have a unique opportunity today because you actually have the opportunity to ask questions to two folks that manage some of the most advanced programs that I've worked with. So you'll get some great insights today. So be thinking about your questions. What we're going to do is we'll start off with a couple of questions here, and then we'll go out to the audience. So let's head on up here.
I get to test the stairs.
I'll go right here.
You got it?
Right. All right. So just to start things off, Chris, we couldn't talk without talking about generative AI, and I think what I want to understand from you both is really how do you see generative AI really changing the nature of the use cases and ultimately really transforming business? So, Mike, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'll add to what I said earlier. Another interesting thing in banking is fraud, right? And there's many different ways that fraud happens. And once you kind of get that first pattern down, the first person to commit a new kind of fraud, they like to leverage that and build that out quickly. And so in my world, we've built a reputation with our fraud group. And what that really means is they pick up the phone and say, hey, I need a solution within 24 hours. I need to put holds. I need to report these cases and have the facts kind of updated and everything like that. So we've generated bots that do that. And then in certain situations, the expectation's 24 hours. Now, wouldn't it be great with generative AI to create this process and enhance that, and then create that bot instead of hours, in minutes? To me, that's exciting. The developers being able to utilize and tweak that.
Yeah. Matt, what's your perspective?
So with generative AI, I want to think about more from the employee perspective, where a lot of the times the information that they need to do their job effectively is kind of hidden behind layers of complex policy, procedure documents. Just think about the amount of effort it takes for onboarding to happen. It's like before an employee is even useful to you, you're spending 2 to 3 months training and onboarding them. And if that onboarding doesn't go well and they leave in 6 months, you're not really getting any value out of that employee. And generative AI, one of the pitches that I'd made was real life training scenarios. So a person that would be dealing with a customer, the best training that we have right now is role playing with other workers that are also being trained and don't know anything, so it's not really productive. What if they could just interact with speech to text generated generative AI human, and that human is a Gen AI model that is applying for a loan? They can get that kind of real training in real time, and now that employee is going to be onboarded in a more realistic way, in a safer way, and you're likely not going to have the turnover rate. So anything where human workers need to be given context, but not removed entirely from a situation, I think generative AI can be really instrumental in that.
Yeah, I mean, the areas where I'm seeing a lot of interest are areas where just huge amount of information, you're trying to synthesize that and make a decision. So typically areas I'm seeing are like, you mentioned like commercial lending, right? I mean, it's one thing to underwrite an auto loan, but when you're looking at commercial lending in terms of the amount of information that an underwriter needs to review, so the ability to synthesize all that so they can make the decision. Notice I didn't say the Gen AI makes a decision, right? But it synthesizes that as a tool for the underwriter then to make that decision. I think it's very powerful. We're seeing it a lot in like compliance, right? So AML, again, investigators trying to read through huge amounts of information and make a decision as to whether or not there's some type of criminal activity. Customer service, so complaints, where most of the work is around researching, to make a decision about how you're going to handle a complaint. So, particularly where there's huge amounts of data, we're seeing a lot of opportunities. Second question is around, so both your programs are fairly mature. So what would you say are some of the keys to really being able to scale automation across the organization? I mean, often one group might be really deep, but how do you get the automation to scale? So maybe I'll start with you, Matt.
One of the things that we've had success with is kind of keeping new tools and tech close to our chest until we've proven it and understand it. Because when we let the floodgates open and just say, here's a new tool, everyone have fun, people are going to fail. And if they fail, they lose faith in the product, they lose faith in the COE, saying go for it and not really giving them any guidance. But if we take a use case like that one that I was showing is something I've been working on for like 7 months, if we can take that model, make it work with all of the risk partners, all the compliance people, front office, customer advocacy, whatever the metaphor is, plow the cow path, factory model, whatever you want to say, if we can take that and package it up and then show other teams, here's how you can be successful, they don't have to think about all of the things that we had to think about to get them there. It's been handled for them. So identifying the right tech people and the right business partner that's willing to try something new and then take that and hand it off to someone else so that they can be successful with a lot less effort than if they were to try to go at it alone.
Mike?
Yeah. Finding where to hunt for the right use cases, getting the buy-in behind those, and then, hey, you've earned your spot at the table. Let's keep building upon that. So when I think of the early days of KeyBank and some of these business units, loan processing is one of our biggest. We have 100 automations in that space. When we first started, it was scattered. Were we picking the biggest things? Maybe not necessarily. And then all of a sudden we got a good reputation that preceded us. And then when you think of, you get that one big win, the second one's easier. And the third win and the fourth win you expect, right? So, that winning success, you gotta highlight that. And then another thing that I'll throw out, a differentiator for me, particularly within Key, the infrastructure. So anyone that manages their own VMs, does their own installs, those kind of things, those are challenging. The desktop groups, there's automatic updates, there's global policies, all those kind of things. So totally agree, business partners, the compliance, you gotta get them on board. And then there's another set of people that really control your automation that you have to have that good reputation as well. And then flexibility in that space too. Again, the hunting is probably the best. I love the business process risk identification project that we're on. I had to say no to like 1,000 items a year. I get about 300 items that we say yes to, and about 100 of those we're gonna do them soon, right? And when we think of BPRI, those are risk things that I've said no to historically because they didn't have the business value. No hard save, no contract leaving Key. And now all of a sudden I have this clean slate with the businesses to come in and do some of the most critical processes.
Yeah, I think it's a good problem to have too many requests coming in because that means people see the value.
Stay on that side.
Yeah, exactly. And the key is, I think, as you both said, is really the business sponsorship. Because at the end of the day, you may have a cool tool or technology, but unless the business sees a true value to it and supports that and drives it, it typically doesn't work well if it's just purely, IT-led. So last question before we open it up to the audience here. So, and I think, Matt, you actually gave us a good case study of this earlier, but historically, a lot of the automation is really focused on back office. And I think we're starting to see more and more focus on front office and leveraging all these technologies really to improve customer experience, whereas before it was, improving sort of back office operations. So I wonder if either of you could talk about, if you're seeing that shift and maybe some examples of how that's evolving today.
Yeah, so you mentioned the use case that I have there. It came about with an approach of automation that I go about. I like tracking, when doing a process, I generally ask the questions of where the work comes from, how it gets there, heading all the way back up to the origin point. I don't like current state automation. I think I said that aggressively earlier. And so when I'm trying to rebuild a process from scratch, you start with what the goal is and you work your way back to where it comes in. At a bank, most of the work comes from the customers in some way. And we realized pretty quickly that if we wanted to really automate, we had to do it in the front office. The customer part came kind of second, because as we were looking at the infrastructure requirements and the customer advocacy requirements and all of the things that would go about it, Doing just completely back office automation and then doing it from the front office, really the numbers end up being the same if you get straight through processing. The difference is that the customer being able to come in and get that ownership and that guarantee and not having to come back in a week was really a deciding factor for us, because there's so many things that we try to measure. Customer loyalty, it's kind of hard to quantify on a balance sheet. Duplicative requests, if a customer did something on Monday, checked back on Thursday and it wasn't done, did they just put in another request? How many of those are happening that we're paying employees to work through? There's a lot of those types of things that are hard to really quantify, but are definitely there and everyone understands them. And it seems silly to say that the customer focus ended up being an accident, but now that it's been discovered, it's almost one of the driving forces for all of the automation that we're doing.
Yeah, I would piggyback on that. There's a lot of value and acceleration in that front end when you get the chance to touch that data sooner, rather than it's gone from an origination system to a servicing platform, and now you're doing QC, 2 hops later. Right. That's a challenge, right? And so getting that up front, did someone upload a tax document instead of their bank statement in the wrong slot, right? Identifying those pieces up front makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and a lot of that customer stuff, because I mentioned the old processes where it's a fax to the back office, we've had a process that we were reviewing recently where the person in the front office would fill out a cover sheet with handwritten notes about what the request is to send to the back office, which means that a person has to physically read that before they know what action to take. If you just put that in a Copilot form or any structured form, do this on this account, you don't need a human to read anything in the back office. You're grabbing that data in a structured way up front.
Well, and that's what's exciting, I think, about the technology is usually you have to make a trade-off, like are you going to try to drive more efficiency and reduce cost, or are you going to enhance service, right? And this is sort of, you get both, right? Because you get a better customer experience and it streamlines processes. So I'm going to open up to questions from the audience. I have one request of you all, which is if you do have a question, please raise your hand. I'm going to get the mic to you just so folks that are remote can actually hear your question. So who wants to be the brave person to start things off?
The farthest person away from you.
Yeah, this is for Mike. I know you mentioned in there you had RPA first, then you had local platforms. What exactly local platforms were you talking about there?
Oh, I didn't quite hear. Local platform?
Low code. You said low code
platforms,
yeah.
Yeah. So when I think of low code, there's Copilot, and then I also own our low code practice. So when I think of that, it's Microsoft Power Apps, OutSystems, and then for us in particular, calling bots from a button push, it's a JSON call away, right? It's not that hard to execute that and then get the results back.
Yep.
So thank you very much for the information, the presentation. In this case, with you, Mike, my question would be, when you started this Automation Anywhere adventure, right? You mentioned that you transitioned from having a federated system or citizen developers into having them on a centralized system, right? Saying something like you had 22 developers everywhere in the bank, right? And then ended up transitioning to 13 within the core team. Yep. We're having a little bit of that experience where I work at. My question would be, how was that transition of agreeing with multiple divisions or multiple business areas to let their resources go towards your team, right? How was your experience with that? Did you have champions besides yourself, or how was that transition in,
this is a
getting
great
people
question.
to give them the resources to you,
Add on
right?
to that, when you took those people, are they still dedicated, softly dedicated to those lines of business?
Oh yeah, no, this is a fabulous question. I think at any point in scale and knowledge, right, it's like, hey, you could go out and just say, hey, here's an automator, go automate for me, and then it turns into an order-taking situation, right? And so what we had found, we built, let's say, our 22 automations, and then people started to move to other departments anyway, right? And now all of a sudden you got this technical debt and no one knows how to fix it. And the guy that's in the other department, you gotta tap him on the shoulder, hey, come back. You know the awkward situation I'm talking about, right? Yeah, you're pointing it to him now. Good call, good call. And so we wanted to eliminate that, and then the technical debt, there were some very sophisticated solutions, and then there were some that's like, oh, you hard-coded that? Bro, come on, now I gotta redo the whole thing and push. So you get that there's some of those synergies. We hit that threshold, and it's like, how do we accelerate and get past some of this? And that was our frustration point, and everybody deals with this in a different way. I'm not saying that centralizing is your best move. I think it's situational. And depending on how large and the organization is, how sophisticated departments are, whether business or IT, that can be a challenge. So I actually report through IT. So we're not in a business unit, not reporting to finance. And the challenge for us that we decided in 2019 that we're going to move forward with when we picked the 13 people was we're only going to work on hard saves. Someone had to leave the bank or a contract had to leave. That's what we measured ourselves on. And when you do that, all of a sudden the, I'm going to say fluff disappears. And at that point, the people that had came to us, we had a good mix. They were from the wealth group, they were from operations group, and we had 2 or 3 pretty technical people on the team. I also have my own infrastructure team, and those guys came from the desktop group. So I had that technical support, I had the mix of business and people that could push back. Of those original 13, I'm right now at an organization about 45, and those original 13, 5 are managers, leading groups, and they interact with business units, really progress their careers in that space. So I hope I hit on many of the topics that were important to you. You can expand and ask more questions. We could go on and on for hours and debate this.
It's interesting that almost everything you said is the same. I have the infrastructure people. They didn't come from desktop. I'm going to steal that idea when I get back. And a lot of the models that you mentioned are the same, but we are federated, and the COE actually existed prior to the first federated tech crew. We had a person in a business group want to bring in automation anywhere, and someone in enterprise technology kind of like said, hold on a second, this isn't yours, this will be the enterprises. And they stood up what the standard would be. They worked with that tech crew. I mentioned before, building the good operating model to begin with before you shared it. That crew and the COE kind of co-built what the standards were going to look like, and then we started adding in different groups. So no group had some kind of unfair balance of power where they were the first group and now the COE is trying to claw some of that power and standardization back. It was always there from the start. And I think that some people that I've talked to have suggested that if that isn't the case, you're either going centralized or there is no COE, because it's almost impossible to pull back that power over time.
Yeah, the one thing I have seen is regardless of whether, federated or central development, I mean, I would imagine you all have points of contact within each of the business.
Yep.
So, because that's the real key. At the end of the day, the business knows where the real opportunities are. Yeah, you may need to educate them about what automation can do, but they're the ones who really know where the value is. So regardless of how you organize the development, having those points of contact in each of the businesses.
Yeah, I think
really
you have people that represent those lines of business.
Yeah.
Right.
In our COE, we have people that are embedded in those lines of business, doing strategy work with them and helping them plan what they're going to be building. So while we're not the ones doing the centralized development, we're there, poking on shoulders while they're building. So I guess it's just who's paying the developers at that point, but yeah.
That's a whole separate discussion.
Yeah,
I won't get into.
Another fun
All right.
one.
Let's take one up here.
Chair's not working.
You mentioned that, a lot of your bots are unattended, right?
Yeah, most of mine, 288 unattended at this point, yes.
Unattended, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a question around that, So when you're moving from, I'm assuming you were attended at one point and moved to unattended, right? So when you made the transition from attended to unattended, right, were you able to procure same access privileges for your digital bot runners compared to your human bot runners? If you ran into any issues, how did you, get past those challenges?
Yeah, I think you hit on a couple things here. So like unattended versus attended, and another way to call an unattended bot is, hey, make a JSON call and get the work into the queue and kick it off, right? And then you can pass those values back. Now, if it's a more asynchronous, like it takes too long, it's a 5-minute process, all of a sudden now you've got to figure out how you're going to cue that back to a user, and hey, products like Copilot and all those things make that happen, right? Versus if you have queues and maybe you have a bot that interacts with a step in that queue, a work queue is what I'm thinking of, and completes a task, then it's tracked automatically, right? And you can do those kind of activities. For us, the transition, was never really a transition. We're going to go down this path, we're going to go down that path. Now, you talked about permissions. So like when we have business users doing activities, right? And they have their existing, we call them identity management, tasks and things like that. Hey, they had access to prod. Guess what? When you're in IT, there's no access to prod. I mean, it's an exception process to troubleshoot. And so all of a sudden that shift, they did have to make that transition. I now have to do a testing cycle, so it became a little more rigorous from that standpoint. And then I have a separate team that moves that code to production. They'll also do a quality review, a code review, and we have automated scanning tools. And then of course there's the AA product as well on top of that. So, for us, I'd say is a mild transition. We did it so many years ago that now it's ingrained in people. We're one of the few business units that we can submit an identity request and then we actually get it approved in lower environments within 24 hours. That's an exception at Key, not always with every group does that happen. So hopefully that addressed a lot of them.
Yeah, I think I've been seeing a gradual transition to more attended. I think it's for two reasons. One is just because as people gotten through the platform migration, right, and they have a lot more attended capabilities. And then the second is obviously just in terms of the advancements of the Copilot capabilities. And I think especially as people start exploring Gen AI, I think Copilot's going to be key because it's pretty rare where you're using a Gen AI use case and just take the output and boom, like you use it, right? Especially in maybe compliance-related areas where initially, the biggest guardrail aside from data and security, et cetera, is having human in the loop to look at something. That's really critical, and so I think that's why we're just seeing, an increase around attended use cases. All right, we have time for one or two more. Yep. Let's see, I'll go back this way. Oh.
I'm here all night.
This is where the
I'm
real party is.
curious about your thought process in deciding about AI, especially in this sector in relation to DLP risk. Have you made a decision on what you'll use, or are you thinking of using something to locally train like Llama or something like that?
So
Oh,
we'll do lightning round now because
Yeah.
we're running up. So you get like 40 seconds.
That's a complicated answer. We've got for Gen AI specifically in training. Is that what you're asking about? So we're trying to go down the route first of like OpenAI and some of the other publicly available ones with companies that we already have relationships with. Like we already have an Azure stack at PNC. So being able to work with them, we already trust their security for SharePoint, Office, Exchange, all those things. Why not what we're about to send you? It's probably already, the stuff we're sending you is probably already stored somewhere in your cloud. Why not just send it again, right? Eventually, we want to be able to bring generative AI capabilities on-prem, but the problem that we're running into is for some of the use cases that we've come across, to be able to do real-time information back to employee or customer-facing employees, we would probably need more GPUs for that than we have existing at our bank now. So it's we're not sure which direction we're going to end up going. It really depends on the use case and the ROI for those. If it's worth it, maybe we'll invest, or we'll just continue to use some cloud service.
All right, we're going to go to the next lightning round question, then we're going to start playing Western music after 30 seconds.
Oh, love it.
Matt, I was really inspired by your story of getting into your role by automating your own job. And a question I'm curious about is just what people are doing with citizen development. You seem kind of like the ultimate example of a citizen developer.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if either of you can talk to whether you have a citizen development program and just a little bit of how it works.
I ironically do not have one, but I am working on, there are two people that have citizen developer programs. One was in this room earlier today from Nike, and there was another from Nationwide, who I don't know if she was speaking, but the framework that they go about, relies on the COE having some kind of standardized structure using COE Manager or just otherwise. Here's what we want you to build. Here's the framework that you're allowed to build in. You're going to then give this to a technology person so that they can vet it and incorporate it into their solution. It accomplishes the act of getting the requirements from the horse's mouth directly, and also getting some lift in the code perspective. But we currently have not done anything. We're waiting until the migration's done.
I'm gonna
Yeah, I know.
have to pile onto this one.
All right.
We created a program called Tech Ready. We took our operations people, sent them to 15 weeks of boot camp style training, right, for programming. It was Java, right, and focused. We've done 115 people. We dispersed them across the enterprise in various areas. I kicked off. I have an interest in this program. I founded it. I took 15, and that's how I sourced it. And they at first hated it because it's not Java programming, but then they realized they had the mindset and the capability, and they're some of our best challenging developers, meaning they're challenging the business. So love that aspect. And
Well,
I'll hand
first
it
of all, I
back
want to let's give a round of applause for Matt and Mike.
Thank you.
You can tell they have a ton of knowledge, and so we can probably hang out for a few minutes afterwards. Two quick housekeeping things. One is do not forget the big event tonight. So 6:30, I think Besses will be outside at 6:15, so make sure you're there. And also, please do give us your feedback. Take a quick picture of the QR and give us your feedback. So again, thanks. Hope you had a great day. We'll see you tonight and then again tomorrow.